Hello and welcome back to The Vacant Light. I'm back with another video review today, and I'm covering Necro Spirituals from Horn Almighty. If you're not familiar with this band, they are a black metal band from Denmark, and they combine different styles into the music, particularly death metal styles of music, and also sort of a punk attitude, which keeps them from sounding derivative, and it makes them quite a bit different from your traditional like early 90s style black metal. So that's one thing that always draws me to their music, is that difference in approach and that aggression in their music. Now, I was introduced to this band through their split album with Sargeist, which I quite enjoyed. And I also did listen to their third LP called Contaminating Divine before listening to this, which is their fourth record. This album is from 2010 and is a follow-up to Contaminating the Divine from 2009, which I reviewed in a previous video. Now, without further delay, let's talk about the instrumentation on this record. The vocals, in particular, are very low-end, very snarly and abrasive, and that does continue on their previous styles from their past work. That's never really changed for the band, as far as I know. I do really enjoy the vocal tone on the record, and that's one key distinction I'd like to make in this review. In general, I enjoyed the album's tone, but for me, some of the gripes I had with the album were in the songwriting and in some of the choices they used on top of or in addition to that tone that they used on the record. For me, the biggest gripe with the vocals is there's not enough points of particular emphasis on the vocal lines. Like, I don't find I'm remembering as many of the vocal lines on this record as I was with their previous effort, and that's a bit of a shame for me. The other thing I'd like to mention as a gripe with the vocals is that I really felt that the rhythm of the vocals had some issues in certain tracks, particularly sort of towards the middle of the album in the songs Blessing the World and Pestilence and The Illuminated Void. I felt that in those tracks they could have used a little bit more of a better flow to the vocal presentation, where they're kind of just thrown on top of the track, and hearing the vocalist belt out the title of a song can be, enjoyable if it's done with a particular emphasis or in a sort of flow that fits that style. But I felt they were kind of just slapped on those two tracks in particular. So I did enjoy the vocals, but I did have a couple of grips with them. In terms of the guitar work, there's a lot of sort of bassy low end to it, but in general, the guitar work is pretty clear sounding. Like, it's not super lo-fi or like really low definition sounding. I did feel that they have a more modern approach to the music, and the production style was more in line with death metal than actual traditional black metal in general. Now, the guitar work was fairly enjoyable, and I did like that low-end sound with a little bit more of the wiggly high-end guitar parts thrown in there, as well as a couple of guitar solos. So the actual tone and the sound from the guitars is something I really enjoyed. However, the guitar riffs themselves were kind of a mixed bag for me. I felt that on the intro track and the last couple of tracks, you could really hear that they really saved up their best riffs for those songs in particular. And some of the other tracks, I don't feel that the riffs are quite as memorable as they could be, and don't emphasize enough particular parts of the music. So that's one of the gripes I had. So while I enjoyed the tone, I didn't always enjoy all the riffs that were presented. Now, one of Horn Almighty's biggest appeals to people, I think, is their bass playing. And that's definitely not an exception on this record. I felt that the bass playing added a lot to the mix. It's generally always audible and has a nice low kind of snarly tone, actually similar to the vocal style for the most part. Now, with that said, I felt that there could have been more emphasis on using the bass as a lead part, as they kind of hinted on with their previous album. What I'd like to say in particular is the song Blasphemous Burden. That song kind of blows me away, actually, because I love the low, snarly bass tone in the introduction with the complete absence of guitars. And I think that's an idea the band could have used a little bit more, instead of just resorting to raw aggression with bass thrown into the mix. So I did enjoy the bass quite a lot, but I think they could have emphasized it a bit more in the songwriting. And in general, I think the actual tones on this album are stronger than the songwriting that you are presented with as a listener. The drumming for me was actually one of the best parts as well. I didn't really have any gripes with the drumming whatsoever. I felt that it was pretty abrasive. There was a little bit of diversity when the songs called for that, though I wish the tracks would have called for that a little bit more. But I felt that the drumming was punchy, a great use of the kick, the snare, and the cymbal work. And altogether, I felt that the cymbal work was better utilized in the slower parts to add the atmosphere and a little bit more emphasis to those parts of the album, especially the last two tracks. So overall, the drumming is probably the best part of the record altogether. And finally, I'd like to talk about some of the atmospheric effects you'll hear on the record. When you listen to the first track, there's sort of a hint of a bigger atmosphere or a new spin on the music that you may expect while listening to the record. And in particular, the intro to that first track, which is the title track, I quite like that actually, and it added a little bit of a difference when comparing this music to Horn Almighty's previous material. However, I do feel that that atmosphere wasn't fully realized to me as a listener. I may have been overemphasizing that to myself while listening to the record, but I still feel like it would have added a lot more to the album, especially in tracks 2 through 7, where there's just such a raw aggression to the music. Not so much in terms of the production, but just in terms of the song structures themselves, that they could have used a little bit of that atmosphere to break things up. Overall, the effects used here are not that prominent on the record and are used very sparingly, which I think they could have used a little bit more. And that leads to one of my biggest gripes with the record, is that I really felt like they could have mixed up the layout of the tracks a little bit more. In particular, the last two tracks had the most atmosphere, and I think if they had split up the raw aggression a little bit more, maybe stuck Blasphemous Burden somewhere toward the middle of the record, I think I would have had a different approach listening to it from beginning to end. And this is not a record I often listen to all in one sitting because of that fact, and just because of that raw aggression being sort of lumped together in the middle of the album. Now, I don't want to say that I dislike this album because I still do enjoy it. It does have a lot of the same qualities that I have enjoyed from Horn Almighty's music in the past, but I really felt it could have used a little bit more emphasis and a little more planning in the way the tracks are laid out to add, those atmospheric elements at more key points in the listening experience for me. So overall, this is an album I listen to from time to time, but not all that often. And I do find myself listening to a few key songs more so than listening through the entire album itself. So thanks a lot for watching this video, and have a good one.